Welcome, everyone, to Adventures in Mysticism. Today, we have Paul Sokolski with us from Florida, and he has some amazing stories he's going to share with us today. So let's dive in. So, Paul, tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Well, first, thank you for having me. I appreciate you. I created a program called Redesign Your Inner Space, and I help people come back home within themselves and find simplicity and peace and freedom back in their lives again. And it's been a beautiful journey in doing so.
That's amazing. Fabulous. Well, it's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when was the first time you had a paranormal or supernatural or kind of extraordinary experience that was, not of the norm?
Well, I would say I was 5 or 6 years old, and I remember this so vividly. And it's I don't know about you, but I don't remember a dream when I was 5 or 6 years old, right? Even if it was a scary one, I don't remember it. So I know this was not a dream. And I woke up. Now at the time I was my family's Italian and Catholic, and I don't follow nothing against religion. I don't follow that anymore, but it was a beautiful place and time of my life. And so I used to pray all the time, and from as young as I can remember. And I woke up. I was laying in bed. I woke up, and I just opened my eyes, and I saw this. What I would say, and I just brought up being Catholic, is just because the statue is of Jesus Christ, and I saw this man. It was illuminated, almost transparent, and it was at the end of my bed, and it was just like staring at me. And and he had a beard, and it was almost like a halo. It was something like you would see in pictures and whatnot. And I remember I was just staring at it, and it was looking back at me. There was no communication. I was not scared. Like, I was not scared at all. Like, I just completely focused on this image, and I don't remember how long it was, but it doesn't matter. And we just kind of looked at each other, and then eventually it went away. And I wanted it to come back. So, I think most kids would be scared of, something like this. But for me, I was so, like, I wanted to know more. I wanted this image to come back. And that was my first of many, but my first experience that came to me at that age.
That's beautiful. Do you feel like, kind of looking back on that was, the ascended master of Jesus sort of visiting you?
Yes, I mean, whoever it was definitely an ascended master. And I believe that being where I am in my life today, and what has transpired in my life and in my own personal development and everything else, it was like a master visiting me, kind of like opening me up to this space.
Mm.
I was not aware of what that even looked like, until later on in my life. But I think it was just like, kind of showing up saying, "Hey, bro, like, we're popping in here, and you're going to see more of us, but like, we're just kind of laying the land for you." And so, definitely, I believe it was everything to do with my path and where I am today, for sure, 1,000%.
That's fabulous. And I love how you were just curious, as a child. You're like, oh, I want to know more and I want you to come back. And, I think that's the heart of children, are so open to these types of experiences, sometimes more than adults are, because the mind isn't so in the way of like, what is this here? What's happening? Da, da, da. Instead, it's just like, oh, cool. you know,
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Fantastic.
totally.
Now, I know you said that you've had, some really big, like, transformational experiences with the paranormal. Would you like to share one of those?
Yeah, actually, I'll share a medium one and then we'll go into a big one if you choose, because
Absolutely.
it's
Let's
like
do
leading
it.
up to it. I back in around, I think I would say about 11 years ago, it's kind of where my life really changed in a huge way, where I think the old part of me died and this new version of myself stepped into who I am today, the man that I become today. And this transformation, I believe, is happening throughout our lives, but it really came to fruition when I went to Chennai, India, and I spent a month with monks up in a place called the Oneness University. Some people may know that. And it wasn't through a Tony Robbins group, although Tony brought a lot of people there. And it just happened to be that when I went there, this group that was with me was like 5 people. Normally there's 60 people. Now I went to this private part of this retreat area. There was a secondary school or university that they would call it, that was kind of like a much bigger and a lot more people. So I wanted it to be a little bit more private. I was thinking 60, 100 people. There was 4 people. Which, what does that mean? Well, we each had our own monks. And so it was like one-on-one, most incredible experience. So I go to this place, not knowing anything about meditation, nothing really knowing much about spirituality. And they took us into the first day. We started doing meditation. Now, I never meditated before. So imagine I'm meditating all day. And within like 2 hours, they come up and they do what's called a diksha. And a diksha in English is a blessing. They place their hands on top of your head. And it was like somebody plugged me into an electrical socket. The energy that was running through me was so incredible. And I'm kind of like looking around like, thinking something, they put something in the tea, or, something's coming out of the air conditioning vent. I don't know, but I'd never experienced this before. So that night, or maybe it was a night later, they brought in what they call the oneness blessers. And there was about 20 people, 30 people in the room. And they literally carried these monks carried them, because they're 24/7 in meditation. And they brought them in the room, and it was just very interesting. Like, I could feel the energy like shift, and I don't even know what that meant then, but I felt something different. And I heard somebody, they brought him in, they sat him down, these monks' eyes were closed, and I heard somebody like clear their throat. They went, something like that. And out of nowhere, I start laughing, but laughing uncontrollably. Like, I could not stop laughing. And I mean, like, looking at myself, if you remember when you're, now I cleared my throat. When you remember when you're a kid and you're in school and you couldn't, like, you're trying to stop yourself from laughing.
Right.
I was laughing so hard, trying to stop. It was impossible. I mean, my clothes were soaking wet. And all of a sudden, behind me comes this monk, and they have a monk for a oneness blesser for women and a oneness blesser for men, because in their culture, that's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
When this monk touched my shoulder to go up there, I literally, in a nanosecond, stopped laughing. Like that.
Wow.
I'm like, what is going on here? So I walked up to this oneness blesser. They say they feel your energy. So this oneness blesser wrapped his arms around me and started shaking and crying. And at this point in my life, I was, just had moved from New York to Miami. I had just gone through a divorce, and I was just like, really finding myself, but was having a tough time. And so I was feeling all my pain. Mm-hmm. And so I just stood there for a couple of minutes. They brought me back to the back of the room, and they laid me on the floor. And as soon as they let me go, I lost it. I started like laughing uncontrollably again for like about 15 minutes.
Wow.
And so that night I went home. I was so exhausted literally from laughing. Like, it's so much energy came out of me. So I went home and I went to bed, and I woke up. It was the middle of the night. And I'm trying to recreate this day, because while they were doing the diksha, this blessing, I was also seeing all, at the time I didn't know they were chakra colors. I was seeing deep purples and yellows, and it was like they would come, like my eyes were closed, but they would come like a jellyfish. They would come in and out like this in my mind, and it was so beautiful. And so I'm trying to recreate this, and I'm just laying in bed, and I'm just like, this isn't working out. I'll just do it another day. And the minute that I let go and just, I don't say gave up, but I just like stopped trying, I started seeing these vivid colors, dark blues and yellows and golden colors. And I remember just laying there, and my toes literally started vibrating. Like it felt like, I don't want to say electric shock, because it was not, it wasn't painful. It was beautiful. And I kept saying, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. And this energy started on my feet and was like literally encapsulating my entire DNA. Like it was coming through my ankles, up my, my bottom of my legs, my knee, like, and I'm just like, and I kept saying like, I don't remember exactly, but I know I was releasing a lot of stuff. I'm like, I'm tired of suffering. I'm tired of living this way. And I was like crying hysterically. Like all of this release was happening, like this cleansing. And this thing took over, and it basically was from head to toe. And my body was just vibrating, and I didn't know what was happening. And so it lasted, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes. And when I got home after this month in India, I got back to Miami, and I laid in my bed, and I'm like, okay, let me just try this, because, you question stuff when you're new at this,
Sure.
And I had the same experience, literally the same experience. And so, that was something that I had never, ever experienced in my life before like that. And that was really since that, that time I explained when I was 6 years old.
Right.
That was the next experience. Now, there were some people that were around me that experienced something, like my ex-wife had experienced something with my grandmother that had just passed away. But that wasn't, she told me about it, but I wasn't actually involved in it. But this particular story that I just told you was like the second thing.
That's amazing. So, when you said you had your own monk, what does that mean? What did that mean exactly, to spend an entire month with kind of your own monk?
Yeah. So there was five. There was Ashwin, Rakshith, Ananda. There was one other one, and these guys were like the head monks of the school or the university. And so generally they're teaching all day, but because there was nobody there, which was very strange to them, I was able to get my own guide. And so to ask these questions, like to ask the question about, what does this mean? Like, what was this energy? And they're just like, oh yeah, that's, yeah, that's normal. I'm like, well, it's not normal for me. Like, yeah. But it's like, I'm like, so everybody experiences that? They said, no, we don't tell anybody what to experience or not. Your experience is for you and for your journey.
Mm.
And so it was, to me, it was a way of like, it was almost like this vibration was like rebooting my system in a sense. Like you're like taking the old, like it extracted everything that was toxic in me, in my past and whatever it was. And it was like, it was vibrating it out of my body. I felt like such a different person. It was something that I could feel more than I can articulate, but it's like, wow. So then to have, to be guided, to have this monk with me, to ask these questions and get clarity about things that you don't normally get when you go to an event, or you go to a big retreat and there's a lot of people, you're talking to people in the retreat, but you're not talking to the one that's doing, that knows everything. And so I was like, with like these masters it was just so impressive and I felt so appreciative and grateful for their time and their energy and their wisdom. It was, wow. It's just incredible. It just was planned perfectly, divinely for me in the time I was in my life.
I love that. That's beautiful. So you had this massive, huge experience. You came back, you tested it out, and then how did it change your life?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I want to share that right now. I also tested one other thing really quick before I tell you that
Yeah,
story. So when
definitely.
all of this was going on, they said that when you're touched, and we all are, when you're touched by this energy, and this will go into the question you just asked me, it's so powerful when you realize who you are. And we're not talking who you are in a physicality and human. We're talking about who you are beyond this vessel. When you know that, you can even stop a baby from crying that's 10 feet away from you or 100 feet away from you. And so I was flying home from India, and I'm sitting up, I'm on a 747, I'm on this upper deck in first class, and there was only one other family that was about four, seats behind me. And I just saw them walk in quickly. I wasn't paying attention, but they were carrying a baby, but I didn't even see, the baby's back was to me. I didn't see anything. We get on a flight. We're about an hour and a half into this flight, and this baby starts crying for like 5 minutes. It's crying and crying, and I'm hearing the baby, and all of a sudden, bing, my head goes off. Wait a minute. They told me that when this energy touches you, that you can even stop a baby from crying. So I closed my eyes, and I imagined this baby. And I don't know what it looked like. I just imagined a baby. And I was holding the baby, and I was bouncing the baby on my knees, like loving this baby. And, everything you would do, I've never had kids, but whatever, gaga goo goo, whatever I was doing, like, whatever. And this baby was started like in this vision, this baby was laughing and smiling. Whoosh, instantly, this minute that baby smiled in my vision, the baby stopped crying
I love
and
it.
never cried for the rest of this 11-hour flight or however long it was.
Mhm.
So to then answer your question, how did it change my life? Well, I realized that we do live in two dimensions. We live in this physical and also the non. And I realized the importance of that, and what that realization gave me was the gift of knowing that, first and foremost, I am not this mind, I am not this body. It's a tool that I use, it's a vessel that I use to move through life, to have experiences, to be divinely connected to divine royalty in a sense of what I want to manifest, what I want to create. When you understand this conversation, maybe not logically, but understand it to a sense where the mechanisms of how it works. Maybe not perfectly, we don't know, but we understand that there is a mechanism, there is a way. And when you get this, there is a gift for all and everyone. And it becomes not what you do in life, but rather who you become. And so this process of this energy running through me, this awareness, and to be observant of me not like being, I'm not this body or this mind, and understanding that to a degree of what I understand or what we all understand, because we don't really know. Who really knows, right? Of course, I know 1,000,000% that I know that this conversation is real and these things are real, right? And so that was the biggest thing for me. It was like my sustainability became not what's physical, not what's in front of me, not my zip code, not my home or my name or my career or any of that stuff. My sustainability was beyond here. And those experiences taught me. And not only did it teach me, but like you said, I put it to the test. And it changed my life, and it started changing the lives of people around me. Because when people get in front of me, and this sounds very egotistical when I say this, but they'll say, wow, your energy is so inviting. I just want to be around you. Like, it's like, my space feels so peaceful. I'm also in decoration. I've been in my whole life, and I basically leave a part of me on people's walls, and they feel that. And so when you own that, not from a space of egotism, but when you own that and knowing who you really are, that was huge, and it changed my life. I could probably talk for 5 more days about that, but that's a generalization of what it did for me.
So it's so great. Like there's so much in what you said in terms of the becoming who you are as opposed to doing things differently necessarily. So how would you define who you became after that?
Yeah, so I have become an observer of life.
Mm.
From looking from the outside in. So because of course I'm challenged all the time. Of course I am. We all are. I don't care what level you are. But I look at it in a totally different perspective. I look at it like, okay, this is just a hallucination. Like, yeah, I'm caught up in this. I'm caught up in this emotionally. Yes, I'm aware of that. I'm caught up in this. It is happening, at this moment, but it's just an experience. And it's there's so much freedom there. Not to say that I haven't suffered, not to say that it didn't take me down or hurt me or whatever. Like the experience was challenging, of course. I'm not setting that aside. But it's minimal compared to what I really am. And I'm beyond this experience. I'm just here for that. And so this is something that took me a while to practice, I guess you could say, because I don't necessarily know that any of us really understand. But when I say, we understand to a level. I don't know how to articulate that, but it's like it was a practice to continue to put this to the test,
Right.
for my own work and for my own ways in how this was affecting and upgrading me in my life.
Right. There's a spiritual teaching that I talk about where different things are true at different levels of consciousness. And so before you've had these like awakening experiences, this is what you have an understanding of. And then when you have this awakening experience, the mind actually can't go as open as the heart can go, as open as the soul can go, as open as the spirit can go, right? So the mind has its own understanding of what happened. And then there is the experience of what happened. So there's just so many different layers of something like what you described and what a lot of the people and guests on this podcast describe as their experience. It's difficult to articulate pieces of it because we have no frame of reference for it.
Yes, totally.
In the physical.
Totally. Yeah. And that's a perfect explanation of what I'm saying. 100%. Yeah. It's perfectly stated. Yes.
Fantastic.
Well, I'll let you go because I have another story that when you're ready, I can share, but I wasn't sure if you were going to ask me something else. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, I think we're ready. Tell the story.
Drum roll,
we love
please.
the stories here. Tell us the story.
I was another manifesting story, but for another time. But I manifested one of the largest, most, I would say the largest personal development guru in the world, and I was able to work with him personally for a year, and Tony Robbins. I'll just say his name. Why am I beating around the bush? So I was in his house for probably I'm about an hour south of him. And anyways, I manifested that whole thing. There's a whole story behind that, but I called it out. I wind up like 3 months later in his house, and it's just amazing story. But to get to our story on this conversation, I was invited to Business Mastery as a private guest of him. And so I got to sit front row and, whoop did he do, like whatever. But it was cool to be up there with, his best friend from 18 years old, who was the godfather of his kids. And like he knew Tony when he was like, before all this started. So it's funny to see their engagement and stuff. But anyways, sitting next to me was this gentleman who I later found out he was a medium. And I had never gone to a medium before, and which was interesting because I've tried a lot of things. And to make the story a little shorter, but he lives in West Palm, so he was about an hour and a half, north of me. And we figured, hey, let's get together when we get back, and we'd love to do a session with you because I've never done that before. Now, if he's hanging with Tony and he's doing Tony's stuff, like for Tony's people, he's the real deal. So I didn't know that this guy had his own show. I didn't know any of that. And so I go to his office and I'm coaching him on his business, and and he's like, okay, let me do your session. So he has me write down on a little cue card all the people that I wanted to connect with that have passed on. And he said, when you're done, fold it up, ask the question, and fold the piece of paper. And when you're done, call me back in the room. So I did what he said. And I put three people's name. I had put my grandfather, Sam Cuccinelli, my grandmother, Kate Cuccinelli, and my very first mentor who had worked with me. And she had just passed away 2 years ago with lung cancer. Mm-hmm. Those are the only three people that I had on there. And so I asked my grandfather, at the time I had been, I asked my grandfather, I asked a question about somebody that I had just met at the time. This was probably 5 years ago now. And so I asked my grandmother a question, and I asked Holly, my mentor, am I on the right path for what I'm doing in the coaching and all this stuff? And so I fold the piece of paper up, I call him back in the room, and he basically starts to tell me verbatim what the questions that I've written down. My grandfather comes through. And my grandfather, like, he's talking about this person, and he's saying, yeah, her name starts with an I who's Ileana. And then I'm like, well, this is crazy. So the medium, Justin, says to me, well, this is very interesting. He said, I have somebody who says they're not on the list. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? He goes, she's just stepped forward. It's another I. Who's Irene? And I'm like, oh my God, that is like my first wife. I was only married a year. I hadn't seen her in 20 years. She died 2 years before this session that I did with Justin. She died of ovarian cancer. She was remarried. I never saw her again. Mm-hmm. So he says, she's telling me that she wants you to know that she's sorry she couldn't be the wife that she needed to be for you. I'm like, this is nuts. So jumping ahead, wow. 6 months later, I'm looking for a new truck, and I find something on the west coast of Florida, drive out there. There's 16 salespeople. I never talked with anybody. The woman says, do you have a salesperson? I said, no. They hook me up with somebody. We start talking. I do the deal with this guy, and I'm waiting for my truck to be ready, and he says, we start talking, and I said, did you always live in Florida? He said, no, I used to live in upstate New York. I'm like, where in upstate New York? He said, I used to live in Rochester. I'm like, what? That's where I grew up. I lived in Rochester too. So we're talking back and forth, and he goes to check on my truck. I look at his business card, I look at his last name, and I'm like, wow, this name is so familiar. Where do I know this name from? And so I'm thinking, and he comes back, and I'm thinking, all of a sudden, it hits me like a ton of bricks. And I look at him, and I'm like, oh my God. He's like, well, what happened? And I'm like, do you have a brother named Jack? And he's just staring at me like, how the freak do you know my brother? And I'm like, you're not going to believe this. He said, what? I said, your brother married my first wife who died of ovarian cancer. You're the brother-in-law of my ex-wife that just came through a medium like 6 months ago. Now, how do I, out of 16 salespeople, how do I get this guy,
right,
not knowing anybody, right? Mm-hmm. The brother-in-law of my ex who came through a medium like two months before. And so I'm driving home 5 hours back to Miami, like completely like wowed, okay? A year later, I have one of my private coaching clients in, We're driving back from dinner. I'm on the express line in 95, on Interstate 95. Nobody in front of me, going about 75 miles an hour, and this car out of nowhere comes spinning in front of me, hits the wall. My truck starts braking and steering by itself. This thing was like, I mean, it probably was 10 seconds. It seemed like an hour. It's like time almost stopped. And all of this was going on. It's like slow motion. And when this car hit the wall and bounced back into the traffic on Interstate 95, it took out like 5 or 6 cars. I kept driving. I looked back at my client, he looked at me. I looked at the clock. It was 11:11.
Wow.
And
Chills.
never, like, not one scratch, not one. So I was protected, like fully protected. And
That's
so,
amazing.
yeah, that was a very powerful experience.
Yeah, those are great. I mean, amazing things that you've experienced.
Yeah. Yeah. And then my last one was just 2 years ago in Key Biscayne. Key Biscayne is a small island right off of Miami. It's a little private island. Well, it's not really private. You can get on it, but it's very exclusive. And I just moved back there. And I was in the process of, like we just got into this whole thing that's going on in the world now. And I was looking for guidance to lead. Like, what do I do? Like,
Mhm.
and I was on a walk that day. I was told in my meditation, you're going to see, this is what you need. You need to leave the island. I'm like, what? Like, I just got here. No, you need to leave the island. And we're going to show you, we're going to show you a large white feather. And you're going to know when you see this, that it's time to go. Like, this is serious. We need you to leave the island. I'm like, no, okay. So I'm whatever. I don't even want to believe it, right? I'm talking to my mom on my walk, because at the time the beach was closed. I'm walking down the sidewalk on the island, and I'm talking to my mom, and I look down, and there is this feather, white feather, this big. It was
Wow.
like 2 hours after I got this out of my meditation. And I'm like, what? I pick up the feather, and I'm like, okay, I got it. I'm out. I'm going. Like, I get it. Like, I know not to defy what the universe tells you. So I don't know the time frame after that. It maybe was like a couple of weeks. It could have been a month. I don't remember. I woke up in the middle of the night, and I opened my eyes, and I had a long hallway that went to the bathroom, and I opened my eyes, and there was this spirit staring at me. Now, it didn't look like the one I saw when I was 6 years old. It was a little heavier. He had like a rope tied around his like it was a whatever they used back then. I don't know. Looked like a rope tied around as a belt, and he had a beard, and he just looked at me, and I just immediately like I didn't lunge at it, but I reached because I wanted to touch it,
Right.
and it went away.
Mm.
And I fell back to sleep. And so when I woke up the next morning, I'm like, okay, wait, was I dreaming? Did that actually happen? Like, it was so vivid. So I asked in my meditation, look, I need some guidance here. Like, was this a good spirit visiting me? And like, is there a message? Like I need help with this, and I'm hearing audibly again in my meditation. It was a good spirit. There's nothing to worry about. Like, you're being guided, and you're upgrading, but we're going to show you, because we know you question at times, and we're going to show you, like we always do, that this is real. And so, I think, not, I don't want to say you, but me, sometimes in the past, I would think, well, I'm just talking to myself. So it's just me, like, talking to myself, like you laying in bed thinking, oh, I got to do this today, I got to do that today, right? So like, so it wasn't feathers. I didn't hear feathers. I didn't hear, 11:11 or, anything else that I would normally say. Then we're going to show you something that's something really different. You're going to see a dolphin today. Now, I live on the beach, and of course there's dolphins in the ocean, but usually mainly we'll see them more in the intercoastal. So I've never seen a dolphin in years on the beach, ever. So I'm like, wow, this will be a real challenge for me.
Yeah.
So I'm on the beach, just shot a live meditation live on the beach. I'm finishing and I'm going through the community that was on there. Somebody new was on the list. I never saw them before. So I went to her Facebook page and I scrolled like down like 3 frames and there's dolphins jumping out of the water. And I'm like, yeah, okay. There you go.
Here's what I love about that is that we in our mind think it's going to be a certain way, right? So you're thinking, well, I live near a beach. They're going to be out in the ocean when I'm out on the beach, right? And then instead they show them to you in a picture. And it's just that reminder that like we're going to give you what we tell you, but it's not necessarily going to look like what you think it's going to look like.
Right. Yeah. Like you would think, like audibly, I heard today in my meditation, again, audibly, like we're going to show you what you always say. Right. So I'm thinking 1111 on my phone, which I always get. And I'm driving back to the office here to have this with you. And it's a lot of traffic. I look over and there's a truck and the last 4 numbers are 1111.
There you go.
And it's like all the time. So I don't question anymore. I just know that it's real. And to me, it's just beautiful. Like I feel so loved and protected. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's a beautiful place, I think, to start bringing us to a close is that, that all of these adventures are for our growth and our learning and to really allow us to know that we're not alone, not
Yes.
ever alone. Yeah. So, given all of the stuff that you have going on in the other realms, what are you focused on now in your personal space or your business?
Yes. Well, my personal space, I have my date with the universe every night, which is like rock solid time for me. And yeah, I in my business, redesign your inner space has really taken off for me. I'm finishing a book which I downloaded from the universe, the 4 Fs, which is on foundation, faith, frequency, and forgiveness, and how those 4 Fs tie into every core of us. And I just asked the universe to simplify what it was that I know and to be able to explain it to people in an easier way. And so, yeah, I'm just wrapping that book up. And we have been running a meditation group called Daily Dose of Clarity. It's for women only. And we were doing it 5 days a week. We did it for 6 weeks. And now it's now moved to Redesign Your Inner Space. We do 2 calls a month. And it's just a beautiful place for women for community. We're just building a community. And it's just, it's many beautiful things that are happening there. But it's really around the inner space, clearing energy centers, inner child stuff, higher self, and a lot of inner work stuff. And to have a retreat also that we're doing coming up next month, April, a weekend retreat here with the women that are in Daily Dose of Clarity that are coming into the retreat. So it's just really cool stuff, and I'm really excited about the way it's all unfolding.
That sounds beautiful. And you shared quite a bit more about your 4 Fs on Spiritually Architect the Future last weekend, where you were a guest. And the replay weekend for that, if you all missed it, is coming up for just 48 hours. You can watch everything for free this weekend, and the information on that will be in the show notes. And if you happen to be listening to this podcast after the April 2nd and 3rd replay weekend, it is also available for purchase on recording. And the information for that will be in the show notes as well. So we will also have information on how to get directly in touch with Paul down below in your show notes also. So Paul, thank you so much for being with us here. It was a pleasure to hear your stories and to really just be in your space.
And such a pleasure. And thank you again for having me. And it was a pleasure to share.
Wonderful. And thank you to all of the listeners for tuning in. We appreciate your time and your energy contributing to the continuation of this podcast. Have a beautiful evening.